Okay, I've never done this before, but I guess it will be important to get it all down in case they ask for more evidence or anything. Just, collect my thoughts and have them all in one place. My name is Graham Luciani. I am 28 years old, and I live alone in my childhood home. I inherited the home a couple of years ago, after my mother and father passed away. Separately, of course. My mother died first, and a couple of years later, my father died, leaving the place to me. It can be hard to manage such a large property. I am the youngest of 8 children, and you can imagine how big the house must have been to provide shelter for so many people at once. Loneliness can be maddening at times, and my workday of sitting in an empty room, typing numbers into a computer, does not help with that at all. Needless to say, I rarely interact with people. When I moved into the house, it wasn't in the best of shape. I have no idea how my parents managed it. The windows were boarded up, the ground was overgrown with weeds, and the interior was thick with dust from long neglect. After about a week, I managed to bring the place into a more or less acceptable condition, but after a while, the massive size of the building made itself felt, and it became clear that I would be physically unable to take care of it. Instead of selling and moving, I decided to divide the house into 2 equal houses, one of which I could rent out. There would be less cleaning, and I would finally be able to acquire at least some source of income from tenants, which could fully pay for the renovation. The idea was simply great. In the town where I lived, before making any significant changes to the land, building a swimming pool deck, demolishing, extending a house, etc., you had to visit the town hall first, discuss your plans, and ask permission to do such a thing. Usually, the process is pretty straightforward, but in my case, it was very different. I visited the town hall after making an appointment with Mr. Alan Carter, who was then the head of land modification operations. I discussed my idea of dividing the house into 2 smaller units, after which he asked over the intercom for someone to bring the plans of my house from the registration room so that I could clearly explain what exactly I was talking about and what I was planning to do. A few minutes later, a rather attractive young woman walked into the room, carrying a roll-to-pay-free roll of paper. She handed it to Mr. Carter, and, smiling at me, she left. A few minutes later, Mr. Carter showed me the plans. As I looked at the plans, I noticed that among other things, they showed a door leading into a small room, which turned out to be my kitchen, from which a staircase led deep underground. I pointed it out to Mr. Carter, and he gave me a strange look. "Mr. Luciani, most likely, this is a staircase to the basement." I was simply shocked. I had lived in this house for almost 20 years. I was born, left the house, and returned again, and never in my life knew that there was a basement in the house. I asked Carter if I could take the plans home to thoroughly study the space that had opened up to me, but he refused, arguing that he could not allow me to leave the building with the original. However, he gave me a copy. When I got home that night, I made myself a cup of tea, then grabbed a torch and looked at the wall where the door was supposed to be. My mom and dad had wallpapered the kitchen years ago, and it had been in great condition ever since, so I had not changed it during the renovation. The wallpaper was a hideous yellow with a floral pattern, and as I went to examine it, running my fingers along the walls to try to find any sign of a depression, I half wished I had torn it off sooner. After some time spent fiddling with the wallpaper, I did indeed feel a small uneven surface. Now, wanting to know what was in this room, I took a kitchen knife and began to peel away the wallpaper where the unevenness had been. After a few minutes, I managed to pull off most of the wallpaper, and I found a door in front of me. The door was made of relatively sturdy wood, but it had no handle. Instead, there was a notch that allowed the door to be slid to the side, similar to how automatic doors in supermarkets open. Behind the door was only cold emptiness. Judging by the position of the door, the secret room was located right next to the stairs to the basement. I looked around with the help of a flashlight. There was nothing interesting here. At least, I did not see anything that would help me understand why the room was hidden. There was a strange earthy smell in the air. I realized that my parents knew about the place, since they were the first ones to arrange the house before I was even born. With a flashlight in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other, I explored the room, As I thought, there really was a long staircase going underground, leading, it seemed, into a deep dark abyss. I thought about turning around and walking away, but the thought of the strange room in the basement, freely open while I slept, stopped me. I decided to check the basement before I did anything else. I began my descent. My footsteps were incredibly loud against the oppressive silence, and the deeper I went into the abyss, the more the cold air and the smell of the earth penetrated my bones. Finally, I reached the bottom, and found that I was no longer standing on a tree or a rug or anything else that you would expect to see in the basement, but in dirt. The flashlight illuminated a very long corridor. Very carefully, I walked forward. Eventually, I passed a room to my left, separated from the corridor by a thin and tattered curtain. As I passed it, I froze in horror at the sight that greeted me. The room was filled with decomposed human bodies. Each body had been completely torn apart and left to rot. As soon as I entered the room, the stench of rot overtook me. I immediately felt a lump of food rising in my throat, and to suppress the urge, I had to leave the room for a couple of minutes. I was about to go upstairs to call the police when curiosity got the better of me again. I went into the room and took a closer look with the help of the light from the flashlight. I held my shirt over my nose to protect myself from the stench. There were many strange objects lying around the room that I had not expected to see. There was a tiny radio on a shelf, and several small teddy bears were scattered on the floor, along with a broken rocking horse. I also saw the bed. Had some sick maniac been living underneath me all this time? I came across a small tattered book lying open on a shelf just behind the radio, and I grabbed it and got the hell out of there. The police were going to check everything else. I wanted to get as far away from this basement as possible before this maniac came back. Running into the room, I slammed the door and threw the book I found on the kitchen table. I was very scared that this thing could come back and notice that I was in the basement and then take me to the other world or kill me or whatever. There was no way I could lock the door, so I decided to call the police and hide behind the door, armed with a kitchen knife. The operator told me that the police would be there as soon as an officer was available. I sat at the kitchen table, across from the door, gripping the handle of my knife tighter. Noticing how dirty my clothes were from my time in the basement, I stood up to quickly rinse my hands under the tap. I remembered the book I had brought with me from the basement. I picked it up and looked at it more closely. It was made of worn leather, and it looked like it had been used way more than once. It felt incredibly thick. I opened it up. It consisted of a number of strange, childish drawings of a strange creature in handwriting that I could really not decipher. It appeared to be a diary, as each page had dates on it, and it was dated 1978. Almost every page of the diary had pictures of the strange creature, along with two other repeated signatures that barely resembled human handwriting, and suddenly, I made out the word DAG, D-A-G, scrawled across the page. I was trying to decipher one of those pages when there was a knock on my front door. I stood up, still clutching the kitchen knife, and opened it. The police had finally arrived. The police searched the house and took me to the police station. I was worried that they would think I had committed those horrible murders, but the police were quite friendly. As soon as I showed them the diary, they asked me to take it for investigation. Of course, I gave it to them. They put me up in a hotel while they investigated my house. When they called me into the station 3 days later, they had news for me. A slightly chubby but stern-looking officer, Officer Reeves, I can't remember, informed me that the hallway under my house led to a small transformer station quite a ways away from my house, the floor of which had been breached from the inside a couple of years ago. He told me that someone had definitely been living in that room underneath my house, and after DNA testing of hairs found on the bed in the room, they determined that the person living in the basement was related to me. The police also determined that whoever had been living underneath me had been partially gnawing on the bodies in the room the entire time. The cops said they checked all medical records on me, my relatives, and my parents, and found out that my mother had actually given birth to 9 children, the oldest of whom was born in 1972. He was diagnosed with an unknown disease that caused nightmarish mutations. They showed me the birth certificate of the child in question, and the name that I saw sent shivers down my spine. Born May 29th, 1972. He was indeed related to me. A chilling tale from the Northwoods. About 5 years ago, in a Porkies. First snow of the year has left a light dusting that flocks everything in white. Break camp at 6, start heading down the trail, hoping to make the Lake of the Clouds by lunchtime. About an hour long, I start hearing a dull, rhythmic thudding in the distance. As I keep walking, the sound gets closer, more distinct. It becomes apparent it is drumming. Decide to break off the trail to check it out, because it might be hippies, and they might have pot. Tracking the sound, I realize there's a sort of droning buzz accompanying it. Round a hill, I come across a ravine. In the bottom of the ravine, there is a man sitting cross-legged, beating a drum with a hatchet, and chanting in what sounds like Finnish. He is completely naked, except he's wearing what looks like an uprooted birch trunk over his head like a mask. He is smeared with blood. I have my .357, because black bears, on my hip, so I draw it just to be safe. Man stops drumming and chanting. Tree trunk spins around on his shoulders towards me. There is a knot hole that his huge eyes stare at me through, and my blood goes cold. I barely stammer out, "Howdy." Man springs to his feet and sprints at me full tilt, brandishing a hatchet. I fall backwards, thumb the hammer, and fire a shot at him at 20 feet. I don't know if I hit him, because he jumps into the air and runs off in the other direction. I watch him disappear over the other side of the ravine before I remember that I'm not as down. Nope, 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 nope. I hightail it back to the trail, running as fast as my legs will let me. Get to the trail, and I just keep running. After 5 minutes of dead sprint, I stop to catch my breath. I am doubled over, puking drool and gasping for breath, when I faintly hear soft footsteps quickly getting louder behind me. Turn around in time to see a birch stump with a gruesome, bloodshot eye 6 inches away from my face, then blackness. Come to, I don't know how much longer later, when some other hikers shake me awake. They found me on the side of the trail, passed out and bleeding from the head. Looks like you tripped and cracked your head on a rock. Don't move, you might have a concussion. I look around, dazed. All of my gear is accounted for, except for my Colt Python. Park rangers are called, and I am evac'd to the nearest hospital. Decide it's best not to tell the doctors or rangers what happened. On account of my head wound, it would just make them write it off as brain damage, and ain't nobody got time for that. Go home, report gun missing, and decide to never go hike the Porcupine Mountains ever again. This is completely true, and I am hoping just a drug-induced hallucination. Be it in college, living in an apartment with 2 roommates, abandoned mental hospital just about a mile away from campus through the woods. Decide to get drunk and go poke around inside of it at night with my friend. We had talked about spooky stuff a lot as an interest. Neither of us took it very seriously, but both thought it would be very cool to see something. So we slammed like 5 beers and froze them in a backpack and walked to it. Have to admit, it is very spooky looking outside. But we find a hole, rummage around, just a lot of old shit. Smells like we are definitely damaging our lungs being inside. Decide to leave and climb out. I really have no idea, probably because we were drunk, but we split up. Maybe disagreement over way back, no clue. He walks back to campus. I decide in my drunkenness that it is way too cold to walk all the way. I actually feel like I could get hypothermia or something. I break into a gardening shed at a building just across the street from the hospital, curl up and sleep there. Wake up at like 4 or 5 a.m. in total discomfort and just walk back, pretty eventless. This was very strange and stupid behavior on my part. I was dumb back then, but this struck me at the time as very strange, especially given the context. This next part is probably totally unrelated, but their proximity in my head have been totally linked for years now. It is a few days or weeks later. I have decided to drink and take Ambien that I got from my roommate and stay awake, because I heard it got you fucked up, and again, I was really dumb. Didn't realize it actually is a really fucked drug. Do not do it. Makes me hallucinate. At first it was kind of funny. I was sitting in my own room drinking a beer and see Larry Bird spinning a basketball just standing there. My time is all distorted because I believe I'm fading in and out of consciousness by this point. Now in the corner of the room by my window is an extremely beautiful girl. I look over like, oh nice, but still weird. I am pretty sure she's not actually there. I look away. Suddenly, I am absolutely overcome with dread. There is now a heavy atmosphere of impending doom in the room. I know it's coming from the woman that I just looked at. I can see peripherally that she has changed in appearance in an absolutely horrifying way. I cannot look at her, no matter what. Somehow I know this instantly. I think I tell whatever it is to leave my room without ever looking back in that corner. I totally black out from there. My other roommate tells me I was at the kitchen sink, turning the water on and walking away. Did it a few times where he would turn it up, finally told me to stop. He described the way I looked at him then as extremely malevolent and still makes me feel eerie to this day. He hid the knives. Wake up with no recollection. Really don't know what to make of it all, but as I said, probably just the Ambien. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Groundskeeper for 2 years. Have some stories. This one happened in about the first month of my career. Before I go further, the city I work in is large, but has very little crime. After getting my first couple work assignments done, I was instructed to watch after the services area, e.g., bathrooms, fountains, telephones. This proved to be a difficult job because I could only do this during the night as the park was in use during the day. Just as my shift had begun, at around 11:30 p.m., I began to hear strange, scraping noises all throughout the park. I first thought to myself, damn it, why do my coworkers have to pull these pranks on the new guys? I kept half expecting for someone to jump out of the bushes with one of those $5 scream masks on. This was much worse. I eventually found the source of the scraping. The source was nearby the main fountain. A rather large stone bench had moved considerably off of its mark. When I went to look up in detail, the following hit me like a train. The bench was secured to the ground with a half-inch steel cable. The cable had looked like it had been effortlessly torn off. There was no way anything human could have done this. A bear maybe? I quickly shook off that though. Despite being a bear-prone state, they never once moved near the park. I sighed and walked to the nearby breaker station and turned on the fountain lights. I needed to repair the bench before daytime, or my boss would have my head. After switching on the breaker, I walked over the supply shed near the playground. Almost the entire time, the scraping was there, but distant. I got the pitch and replacement cables and walked to the fountain. About midway through my journey back to the fountain, I began to see some layer brick taken out of the ground in the path from the shed to the fountain. I was getting super pissed off. I walked briskly back to the breaker station and turned on all main power. That is when I saw it. Perhaps this thing was blinded by the sudden light, but outside one of the windows I saw it. Due to the panic at the time, I could not get a clear view, but here is what I saw. A thin, leathery creature, approximately 2.3 meters tall, with long, muscular arms. I have never done any drugs, nor experimented with hallucinogens, but I was very confident that is what I saw. The creature's eyes widened, and he booked the hell out of there. He was gone in half a second. I dropped everything I was doing, sprinted to my Jeep, and drove out of there. I did not sleep well that night. The next day, the storeroom was ransacked. I was of course blamed for it. I have more if anyone is interested. Story number 2. At around 5 months into my job as a groundskeeper, I was woken up at around 3 in the morning by the local security team. Some kids had trashed the nearby skate park adjacent to the park grounds. So, groggily, I went out to my Jeep with industrial trash bags and drove to the park. The scene looked to be caused more likely by squatters or homeless people than kids. Trash was strewn everywhere. There was an old beat-up shopping cart that they had left deserted. Lastly, there were remains of fireworks in their packaging. Maybe some kids did stop by there. Throughout the night, I studied this area more and more. A lot of the fireworks were unused. There was even a skateboard left. Whatever the kids were doing, they sure left in a hurry. The trash had almost all been picked up. The sun was still nowhere to be found. I took the 2 trash bags I had filled to my Jeep. I decided to take a quick break before finishing up. I cracked open a bottle of water and sat there for a good minute, in near silence. Towards the edge of the wooded area, there was a very steady rustling. I only noticed it when it got closer. The branches from the trees were visibly bending in the path of whatever was there. I yelled out, probably those damn kids. Hey, get out of here before I call the cops and get you all in real trouble. A growl was returned, a deep, vivid growl. Whatever made the noise wanted me to know it was there. I plucked my flashlight off my driver's side seat and went to investigate. The closer I got, the further the thing retreated into the wooded area. I flicked my light on. Sure enough, the thing was crouching there, eyes fixed on me. It bared its feral teeth and growled at me again. I tried to seem as big as possible, like they say to do with bears. I started hollering and waving my flashlight. The thing took no interest in my display. I quieted down. We stared at each other in silence for what seemed like hours before it lost interest and left. I finished my job, but could not help but keep an eye on the woods at all times. I have more stories, but not really a conclusion. There wasn't really any closure when I quit, so if you're looking for some of that, don't. I'm just here to be interesting. I used to work at a cemetery during graveyard hours. Irony. I worked there for 5 to 6 weeks. Super chill job. Walk under the stars, smoke weed, drink beer. I caught 2 gay guys having sex one time. Super howls. The craziest thing that happened was this old guy came to me asking me if he could see his daughter. We had regulations that did not allow people to come in at nighttime. I told him I really shouldn't, but he started to sob in this weird, high-pitched cat-like gargle, so I let him in, but stayed my distance. I went in and did my rounds on the opposite side of the cemetery to give the man some space, but then I heard a loud bang coming near the man's direction, so I ran over and could not find him. I looked around for him until I noticed the front gate was shut and locked. I thought the man must have slammed the gate and then locked it behind him, so I decided to chill out and smoke a joint while I walked to my beer stash near the mausoleum. As I walked over, I kept seeing the shadows of figures around me. I flashed my light, but did not see anyone or anything, so I thought it was due to me being high as fuck. As I got closer to the mausoleum, I see a faint light flickering inside. There is a light inside the building, but it is usually off, and even if it was on, it would be bright. I went into sneak mode and slowly made my way over. I could not see through the windows, so I grabbed my pepper spray. Not supposed to have that, but I thought it might help, especially after the guys, and went to the front door. The lock on the front was broken, so a large hole was in the door. I looked through the hole and saw 3 candles on the ground and someone in the center. I would call the police, but I was high and drunk and had beer stashed all over. I kicked the door in and shined the light over to him and told him I was holding a gun. This guy, with sunken eyes and cheeks, wearing a hooded robe, he had a reverse triangle and eye necklace, looked at me, but did not speak. I heard sounds behind me, so I turned around to say. There was the old man, with 4 guys, wearing hoods, all with the same necklace, standing behind him. The old guy put his arm around me and walked me away, as the other men went inside. He walked me behind the mausoleum and gave me one of my beers from my stash. No idea how he knew it was there. He told me to relax and began telling me how I should not bring this up, how it would look bad on me. He left with his friends after 30 minutes, and I told my boss I caught some gays trying to break in. I still can't figure out what they wanted, or what that necklace represents. I do know that they just put a dead guy in there that was a mason and some Rosicrucian or some shit. Any info would be sweet. Sorry for spelling, I am high as fuck. This isn't really a graveyard shift story, but it did happen at like 9 at night, when I was about 16 or 17, and creeped me the fuck out. Go to grandparents' house to help grandfather with a birthday gift. It was one of those wireless headphone things, where you hook a transmitter up to the TV, and you can listen to the TV in your headphones. They had it set up, but it suddenly stopped working. I turned the headphones on to make sure they are working where they are, and all I hear is loud static. Suddenly, the static cuts out, and I hear absolute silence, and then a woman say, the shadow is closer than you think. And then all of a sudden, the static is back. Transmitter was not even plugged in, and the TV was off. I plug everything back in, and the headphones work perfectly. I don't know what the fuck that was about to this day, but I really hope it was just some random radio signal I picked up. Yeah, none. It probably was a random radio signal. It happened to me once though, and it can be creepy as fuck, especially when they say something weird like that. I've posted this before, but I used to work at a clothing store that had weird things going on a lot of the time. Sometimes, there would suddenly be a strong smell of a dirty diaper. I tore the place apart the first time I smelled it. My manager kept telling me it just happens there sometimes, and that I would not find anything. I still kept looking though, even going through filing cabinets and drawers. Nothing. To make it creepier, sometimes there would be a very clear sound of a baby crying. When they told me about it, I thought they were hearing something else and were mistaken. After all, they were some dumb fucks. Then I heard it for myself, and it was unmistakable. That place really solidified my belief that there are things that we do not understand. Other stuff would happen there. Down in the ladies' department, you would hear somebody walking around when it was empty. I was down there one day and heard somebody walking around in flip-flops. It was so clear and real that I went around the corner to help a customer. Of course, nobody was there. We heard shoe boxes being pulled out and hangers dragging across the bars on the racks, but nothing or nobody there, at least not that could be seen. The name of the place is Wiseman's Clothing in Johnson City, Tennessee. If any Anons live near there, check it out. Be me, 17 years ago, 16 years old, in a hospital, broken collarbone after a skiing accident, cramped together with titanium plate, recovering after operation, feeling okay, no gypsum, but leaving for a week for observation is a protocol in our country. Friends and parents visiting, bringing shit ton of sweets and whatnot that will eventually go to dumpster. When bored, socializing with everyone willing to talk on the floor. Hospital is a tall, post-Soviet building, probably first few floors built during the Austro-Hungary era. One schoolmate visiting, not particularly my friend, but someone with whom I hang out when I'm out of options. Dude considered me his best friend for some reason, despite that we had what I call different life values, but that is not directly related to the incident. Says he's also here to visit. He's visiting his grandpa on the 10th floor. I was in the trauma wing and was on the 3rd. Sure, let's go together. Not like I have much to do. Enter elevator with one of older nurses or sanitation. Buttons up to 8th floor. Ask how to get to the 10th. She mumbles something like, "Stupid teenagers, stop bothering me." Whatever, old hug. Going to 8th floor. Looks like some archive or improvised warehouse. All doors closed, not much going on. Heading towards staircase. 2 kids in like elementary age, 6 to 7 years old, bursting on us from there, laughing. Seems out of place. As we later discuss, we both felt something strange about them the moment that we saw them, but maybe the dull hospital wing affected us. Asked them for some reason if we can use that staircase to reach the 10th floor. They laughed and said something that can translate both to, you can't go to the 10th floor, or you can't reach 10th floor, or you have no business on the 10th floor, and moved away laughing. Okay, whatever. Stairs leads directly on hospital roof covered with that rubber roofing material, with occasional garbage, dishes, wires, vents, your typical post-Soviet building roof. In the middle of the roof, there is like a building on top of the building, but ruined, around 1 or 2 floors tall. Only 2 walls left, and stairs in very bad conditions goes around remaining walls. Something like pick-related, but stairs go around the corner. Out of curiosity, or young stupidity, decided to ascend, but don't know what we hope to achieve. It was more like crawling than walking, due to stairs' bad condition, but also, for some reason, with each stair, the air became slightly colder, and near the end, it required a heroic amount of effort to make a trivial movement, almost like all muscles were paralyzed. We heard those kids somewhere laughing at us, but wind moves the sound away and makes it feel like it's coming from above, not beyond. Looking down, looks like 5 floors below, not 1, head spinning. Fuck it, let's crawl back. Successfully descended, in silence, taking elevator. Sitting outside, sharing what the fuck just happened, and if we both saw, heard, and felt the same things. Schoolmate's phone rings. Sony Ericsson, K750i. Remember being jealous to this days, but now I understand his family, consisting of mom and aunt, living in one apartment, was just bad with finances. Aunt says his grandpa passed away, and is at home, preparing for last rites, some local Orthodox rituals. While thinking on some supportive words, notice, those 2 kids boards bus, like your school field trip, but could not see anything behind windows, maybe was shaded, and it departs from the hospital parking lot. This occurrence haunts me to this day. Could not sleep tonight, reflecting on it again, and figured out that day, I kinda accepted death and my mortality. OC greentext. Be me, 17 at the time. Veteran psychedelic user and avid hiker. Communing with myself and God and nature every weekend. Know what constitutes hallucination. Hike up a favorite hillside, a large state park, usually empty. Completely forested hill, 400 feet. Has a straight swath of trees cleared because a large gas pipeline runs over the hill. Swath is about 1.5 miles long. Straightest path toward top of hill. First minor peak is a great view, since all the trees are cleared when you turn around after reaching the top. Reach the top after eating my LSD, at the bottom 20 minutes earlier. Sun has set. Sit full lotus on a flat rock, and gaze out at the horizon and stargaze. 3 stars behind me to my right look like they are moving. Good acid. Still look like they are moving. Get a hold of yourself anon. Last time this happened, you ended up staring at the star for an hour before you realized it was Venus. But there is 3 this time. Still moving, downward, toward the horizon behind me, which is a second crest, about 50 yards from me. Hear a humming noise. ATV engines anon. Hill is a common place for young kids to take dirt bikes and ATVs. Have to come back after dark because illegal during daylight. Buzzing gets louder. 3 strange looking stars get brighter and continue dropping. Descend to the point where the second crest blocks my view. White glow behind second crest. Quad headlights. Buzzing gets louder. Not quite a motor sound. Light gets brighter. Second crest now glowing, almost fluorescent white. Motor sound stops completely. Replaced with strange whirring that pulses very high and then very low. What the fuck anon? The acid is not that good. Stare at the second crest. 3 silhouettes emerge over the second crest. Be out.jpg. Run down the pipeline in record time in the dark. Godlike agility. True fight or flight. I have run from cops and got adrenaline rushes before, but cops are a known entity. They are human, familiar. Adrenaline, unlike anything ever before. Suddenly can see the rocks and obstacles in the darkness much clearer than before. Combined with extra self-awareness from the acid. Amazing physical feat to descend the hillside so quickly without breaking an ankle. The pipeline is strewn with boulders and loose rocks. Reach the base of hill, book it through the woods to the park's parking lot, hop and beat 98 Camry. As headlights turn on, they illuminate fog that is rolling down the pipeline and approaching a small man-made lake near the parking lot. Stop hiking alone in the dark on acid and on, because ET might see that as a convenient time to reach out. Go home after a session with college study group. Arrive late at night, tired as a dog, head hurts, barely keeping my eyes open. Make my way upstairs, live on the 3rd floor. Arrive on 3rd floor. Notice there is another flight of stairs going farther upwards, which can't fucking be, because the 3rd floor is already the topmost floor. There has never been a staircase there before, ever. Just stare at it in disbelief. Think that I may have entered the wrong apartment. But that can't be, because there is my doorbell with my last name on it. Too fucking exhausted to really think about it. Just drag myself home and fall asleep immediately. The next day, remember about the staircase. Go outside to check it out. It's fucking gone, of course. Somehow, a whole floor has manifested and disappeared overnight. Still the only unexplainable thing I've ever experienced. I wasn't drunk or on drugs or anything at that time. The only reasonable explanation is that I dreamed it all up, but it was all just too real. Still wonder sometimes what would have happened had I gone up those stairs.